How did the kid from your school die? Of all things, an unfortunate camping accident. This was before cell phones. Two friends went out for the weekend to a campground for some fishing over the weekend. When they didn't arrive home at the time they said they would, the parents called the provincial park to see if they were running a bit late. The weather wasn't great and the camp was about an hour away from town, so it was entirely possible they decided to stay another night and drive out in the morning instead. The park warden stumbled upon their campsite and found both of them dead in their shared tent. Turns out it was a cool night and they decided to run a small heater in the tent to be warm, but it was an old heater that didn't have a shut-off sensor built in. The heater ran all night while they were asleep, and since they didn't open the flaps on their tent for air circulation, because they wanted to trap the heat, the tent filled with carbon monoxide and suffocated them in their sleep. So sad, and a week before school too. Edit, wow, I didn't realize just how sadly common this was. R.I.P. to all who died. Playing along a fast-moving creek deep in the woods. First teen gets pulled under really fast. Second one immediately runs and dives in to find him. A minute later, first teen comes back up on the other side, exhausted but thankfully unhurt. Guy who went in to find him was not coming back up. Was in the days before cell phones. Had to run a good mile back up the trail, hop in the car, drive to the nearby park ranger office, East Texas Big Thicket area, and report/get help, along with guide rescuers. Took about 30 minutes total to get back out there to the accident. Still no sign of him. Rescue workers found that under the higher waters were tons of plant/tree debris everywhere. 2 days of removal while still trying to control fast-moving waters, his body was finally found. He had dived too deep trying to find the first friend, getting trapped under the submerged branches, without enough energy or breath to fight against the current to get out and back up. He was only 15. Fight with another kid. Got punched in the head, hit the ground, lights out. I was friends with both of them. Edit. For those asking what happened to the other kid, I don't know. I never saw him again. He was 11, which is too young for juvenile detention in California. Edit, disregard previous. I have a shit memory and moved around a lot. Here's what actually happened and the aftermath as reference in a later article about a similar incident at the same school. In October 1998, a schoolyard scuffle turned deadly when a 14-year-old boy became involved in a fight with 12-year-old Jared Schroeder. Reports at the time indicated the fight began when the older teen, who reportedly had a reputation for disruptive behavior and had a considerable history of disruptive behavior and significant problems with authority, wanted to play basketball and grabbed a ball from Schroeder, who was playing on one of the school's basketball courts. During the ensuing scuffle, the 14-year-old struck Schroeder on the side of the head, causing the younger boy to fall to the ground unconscious. He later died from injuries sustained in the assault. The suspect in that case was eventually found guilty of involuntary manslaughter. Grade 5. He was playing with his little brother when they found their dad's duty pistol. Little brother shot him right between the eyes. Can't imagine how the little brother feels. Was about 50 years ago. Can't imagine how the dad felt either, no matter how well hidden it was. I imagine he blamed himself tremendously. That's sad. There was the one kid in elementary school who was riding his bike and got hit by a car. The school's infinite wisdom was to reiterate the dangers of not wearing your helmet while riding a bike. Fantastic memorial. There was the guy who drunk drove into a pole to avoid a squirrel, as the surviving passengers put it. But the hardest one to think about was my kindergarten classmate. She survived, but her baby sister was killed in the Oklahoma City bombing. There was a boy from a family of alcoholics, parents divorced. He lived with a mom who was a very heavy drinker and a stepdad. Stepdad had a son who spent quite some time in mental facilities and rehab because he fucked up his brain with drug use. The son eventually came home to live with his father and my classmate. One time the classmate accidentally saw his stepbrother sniffing glue from a bag. Stepbrother got mad, poured kerosene on him and lit him up. When his mother saw her child was burning, she jumped out the window and ran away while his younger siblings were trying to put out the fire. Unfortunately, once they managed to, he was already dead. An electrician screwed up rewiring her family's house so a live wire was touching a metal pipe connected to the bath. Her mum was wearing rubber work boots when she filled the bath, so wasn't electrocuted, but she must have accidentally brushed against the tap or gone to add some more water while submerged and was killed instantly. We lived in a very small town where everyone knew each other, so it really rocked our community. She was in the grade above me, so would have been around 10 to 11. In high school, a girl in the year ahead went missing. There were flyers posted for volunteers to help search for her. It was understood that she wasn't the type to run away. Her mom was out of her mind with worry. A few weeks later, her stepfather was arrested. It seems he'd sexually abused her, and then switched from her to her little sister. She threatened to tell, and he murdered her. Then he drove her body out somewhere to dump it, with her little sister in the car. She was too traumatized to remember much. Apparently, he put her body in a dumpster, and it ended up in a landfill somewhere. They got a confession out of the guy by putting him in Genpop and letting the other prisoners know what he was in for. He lasted less than 2 days. Her name was Debbie Moberg. This one guy at my high school tried asking out this girl. The girl's brother and a group of his friends jumped him, did some unspeakable things to him, and the entire school found out about it. He was missing from school for months because he was in the hospital. Eventually he came back to school, but people stared at him. It must have ate away at him because during the summer, his family went on a cruise and the guy jumped off the cruise ship and drowned. In high school, girl who sat next to me for more than 2 years, we were seated in alphabetical order, went to a party one weekend senior year, got drunk and decided to walk home in the dark on nearby railroad tracks. Run over by a train and died. Her seat sat empty for the remainder of senior year. Almost 40 years later, and I still remember her name and exactly what she looked like, before the incident. Hung himself. I was really good friends with him since maybe 5th grade, but I knew him since kindergarten. We weren't talking that much for a bunch of 9th grade, but we really started talking again, and then he died. I was doing multiple school projects with him at the time, but I ended up not having to do them. I was told by my crying mom, and my dad was pretty much crying because of me having to deal with that. There were no clues, or did he ever say anything about his thoughts. Before that year started though, his mom told my mom that he's been having bad anxiety and maybe to not talk to him. He was happy to talk anyways. It was a big story, and there were people from schools away who knew about it, and the classes I was with him in were pretty much pure sadness and crying. The English class was the worst though. I was crying with my head down on my desk, but the co-teacher in that class comforted me. I worked with her until I graduated last year. God bless her soul. Hit by a drunk driver while in a car with 4 people. WS ejected 30 foot from the back seat. Mans got up, walked to a burning car, actually ripped the door off, pulled out all 3 other people and dragged them 10 to 15 foot away, then collapsed. Succumbed to his injuries at the hospital later, apparently had a broken femur, collarbone, wrist and arm, amongst other things. The other 3 only had minor injuries, and the car exploded like 3 to 5 minutes after he pulled them out. Dude was actually a hero. Back in school there were 2 students that died. Drove his father's old car into a river. It was a rainy night and the tires were worn out. By the way, he was too young to drive a car, he had no license. Suicide. None of us knew nor suspected, but he had a history of depression and a weird family dynamic. Then his GF broke up with him and that was the end for him. Then in college there was a guy who died. His father lost his job, didn't have the guts to tell his family that he lost his job and got his family in debt without their knowledge. After that, his father still didn't have the guts to tell his family what was going on, so he decided to commit suicide instead, and he decided to take his favorite kid, my classmate, with him. It makes no sense to anyone, but the father literally killed his son because he didn't want to die alone when he committed suicide. Star football player to my small town school. Parents and faculty idolized him, the whole classic nauseating story. Except for this guy was a giant dickhead. Would purposefully trip overweight girls in PE while running laps around the gym during warm-up. He was known to party and got into more than a few sketchy situations with drunk girls. No girls I knew personally could stand him. He would get away with so much in school just because of his football standing. With that being said, there were a lot of rivers in the area of our town, so it wasn't uncommon to go swimming or jumping off low bridges into the water during the warmer months. One late spring, right before summer break, he and his posse of friends were drunk and river swimming. The story I heard is he had dove head first off of a bridge into the river, his head hit the bottom and broke his neck. He apparently swam to the river's edge, and when he went to stand up he slumped over into the water dead. I was told that standing up is what caused his neck to sever his spinal cord. Died instantly in front of his friends. Obviously the town was devastated, they celebrating this kid for a week at school after. I know this will probably sound bad, but he honestly was one of the biggest pricks I ever met. He was cocky and would bully so many people just because he knew he could get away with it. I had seen him make so many young girls cry. So after his passing, there definitely was an unspoken relief for many kids at that school. Dude was rotten. Edit, on mobile, so I apologize for the formatting.